very much for joining us today. Yes, so it's really, so I'm delighted, honored, and flattered to introduce our speaker today. But before we give the floor to Professor Ardila, who works for the University of Miami in Florida, but now he represents, at this particular moment, he represents Spatial University, and there is a team here. The majority of the audience so are representatives of Spatial University. A newly launched project is Institute of Linguistics and Intercultural Communication of Spatial University. So 1, 2, 3 professor, so 3 master's degree students, and it's a new program which is called in linguistics called Psycholinguistics of Intercultural Communication, a unique program of this kind. So 3 master students of the second year. Professor Irina Ovchinnikova, Professor Ardila will be giving his lecture today, and Associate Professor Stephen Pax-Leonard also represents the Spatial University and Institute of Linguistics. So I'm sure this new book, which Professor Ardila is going to introduce here, will be of great interest to all those who came. So these are enthusiastic people who are really interested. So the floor is yours, and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Здравствуйте всем. I am happy to be here, and thank you very much for the possibility to be here to present this lecture about the origins of human cognition. The question is, where complex psychological processes come from? How complex cognition that you have today appeared through the human evolution? That's the question that I'm going to be approaching in this presentation, and I'm going to be basing this presentation in a book that was recently published, Historical Development of Human Cognition, published by Springer. Right. So I'm going to be based in this book, and as a matter of fact, in this book, the origins, the evolution of different types of cognition are approached. The origins of the language, the origins of the spatial abilities, the origins of writing, the origins of calculation abilities, the origins of executive functions, the origins of cognitive testing, and finally some proposals toward the future. I'm going to refer not to all these cognitive processes, but I have selected 2 cognitive processes, 2 of these cognitive processes, just to review a little bit how they appear during the human evolution. I'm going to refer in particular to the evolution of calculation abilities, how has been the evolution of calculation ability through the human history, and how has been the evolution of writing, the ability to write, across the human history. Those are the 2 topics that I'm going to be approaching today. And simply we begin with an introduction. We can we can think that contemporary man, Homo sapiens, has existed on Earth during the last 150, 200,000 years. So we have been around close to 200 years ago. Nonetheless, during this time, the evolution of cognition has been very significant. The cognitive abilities existing 200,000 years ago and the cognitive ability that we have today have presented a significant evolution. Nonetheless, that particular evolution has been a type of cultural evolution, because from the point of view of the nervous system, the biology, the evolution has been minimal. So we can suppose that this type of complex cognition was somehow derived, evolved from some original abilities that existed. So if human sapiens has existed for about 200,000 years, it is easy to conclude, we have to assume that, as a matter of fact, human brain adaptation was accomplished to survive in those conditions existing 200 years ago, and not in the conditions that we have today. So the brain has been adapted for conditions, adapted conditions that existed a long time ago. And we have a recent evolution that corresponds to the cultural evolution and the cultural evolution. Well, so the question is, the original Homo sapiens existing 200,000 years ago has certain cognitive abilities. But those cognitive abilities are quite different, totally different to the cognitive abilities that we have today. So the question is how, departing from those original cognitive abilities, we have been able to develop the type of complex cognition that we have today. Executive functions, grammatical language, spatial orientation, writing, reading, complex calculation abilities, how have been developed, how have been evolved, departing from those original conditions. And we can assume, we can suppose, we can use a concept that is taken from the theory of evolution. That is the concept of preadaptation. Preadaptation. The term preadaptation in evolution refers to a large change in function accomplished with little or no changes in structure. So there is certain specific initial adaptation that can be used for a different function. Can be used for a different function. So we can use, usually is taking the example of the birds. The anatomical example frequently mentioned refers to the bird feathers. And as a matter of fact, the bird feathers were originally developed, evolved, just to maintain the work, not for flying. And flying, so is a pre-adaptation for a further development, and the further development is the ability to fly. So the ability to fly is somehow taken, evolved from this initial pre-adaptation. So this idea is presented in this particular paper, the evolutionary concept of pre-adaptation applied to cognitive neuroscience. And the term pre-adaptation in evolution refers to a large change in function accomplished with little or no change in structure. The function is going to be changing, significantly changed, even though the structure is not going to be changing or is minimally changing. Thus, pre-adaptation refers to the possibility of a characteristic to adopt a new biological function, to have a new biological function not existing before. The idea that the function of that trait might shift during the evolution historically was developed by Darwin long time ago during the 19th century, and this phenomenon is usually known as pre-adaptation. That is called the pre-adaptation. However, since the term may suggest teleology, it has been proposed to replace with the term exaptation. Nonetheless, the term that usually is used is pre-adaptation. Pre-adaptation. So the question is, which were the pre-adaptation for the complex cognition that we have today? Which were the original abilities, right, that supported the further evolution of the complex cognition that we have today? Complex cognition means grammatical language, executive functions, reading, writing, calculation abilities, etc. That is the complex cognition that we have today. We can assume, we can propose that the complex cognitive ability that we have today, for instance, grammatical language represents the most complex type of language using the grammar, right, is assuming the ability to have kind of representation of the actions. The representation of the action is somehow related with the ability to use verbs. And the ability to use verbs is in the origin of using a grammatical language. For having a grammatical language, you have to have verbs. Verbs are representing actions, and the ability to internally represent the action somehow is going to be supporting the ability to use verbs, and hence the ability to have a grammatical language. And we can assume, for instance, that calculation abilities from the evolutionary point of view and from the point of view child development, we are going to find that calculation ability, the departing point, the original ability, refers to the ability to sequencing the fingers, recognizing the fingers on one hand, and on the other hand, recognizing right and left, certain spatial recognition. So calculation ability, the original ability that probably existed 200,000 years ago in the prehistorical man, was the ability for recognizing the fingers, very likely, and the ability to recognize right and left. And this type of initial support pre-adaptation may have allowed the further development of mathematical concepts. Reading of course, is based in visual spatial perception, is based in cross-modal association. Reading means to associate some visual information with auditory information. Cross-modal association, that's why everything. And as well, of course, spatial perception. Writing is supposing, I'm going to be mentioning writing, is supposing at least three basic abilities. On one hand, constructive abilities to do something, right? Practicability, right? Cross-modal associations, because it's also something that is a movement representing a visual figure, right? Or a visual letter, whatever, that is associated with spoken language, with phonology, right? And practicability. Metacognitive executive function, very likely referred to the use of grammatical language, and we can propose that, as a matter of fact, what we refer as metacognitive executive function, a particular type of complex cognition, solving problem, controlling attention, etc., is somehow based in the ability to use a grammatical language. Grammatical language may have been the prerequisite for developing executive functions, complex executive functions. Well, so, and we find that in linguistics and in anthropology has existed a tremendous interest in finding universals, something that is universal, something that is found across different cultures, across different human groups, etc. And from finding these universal principles, usually three approaches have been used. One, archaeological findings are used as element to reconstruct prehistorical ways of life. Two, by comparing existing human groups, it is possible to find some common social behavioral characteristics that supposedly were existing in the prehistorical man, because they are shared by different human groups. And finally, by taking existing cultures and living languages, right? We can take into consideration similar to a specific parameter to prehistorical cultures and language. It is possible to propose how prehistorical living forms and language characteristics could have been in regard to that particular parameter. And let me take an example. Studying illiterate people, we can somehow think how were cognitive abilities when reading and writing did not exist, how did appear. How were the executive function? How was the form of complex cognition without reading and writing? In illiterate societies, in illiterate people, how cognition is. It means what has changed reading and writing in cognition. And these are the type of studies that were began to be carried out during the 1930s by Vygotsky and Luria. And they pointed out that, as a matter of fact, reading and writing represent a major instrument in cognition, and reading and writing is going to be making a significant difference in the ability to use complex psychological processes, what we today refer as executive functions. So the development of executive functions in a significant extent has been related with literacy. And when we go to study illiterate people in India, in Greece, in Colombia, in Mexico, whatever, in Portugal, right, we are going to find that illiterate people have significant difficulties in certain type of executive function tasks. Hence, reading and writing is going to be supporting the ability of developing complex psychological processes, in particular executive functions, what we refer to as executive functions. Cultural issues have become very important topic in contemporary cognitive neuroscience. So cognitive neuroscience today has somehow been attracted, interested in cultural issues, in understanding the influence, the effect of culture and things like that. Nonetheless, the interest in culture began long time ago in psychology and began, as a matter of fact, since the very beginning of psychology. And one who is considered to be the founder of psychology, the founder of scientific psychology, when he created the first laboratory of experimental psychology in Leipzig, right? He wrote a major book about cross-cultural psychology. So he's in a certain way the founder of cultural psychology. The initial major book devoted to cultural psychology was written by Wilhelm Wundt, right? That is the founder of psychology. So the interest in cultural issues has been existing for a long time ago. I'm going to take two examples of cultural evolution. How certain type of cognition, certain specific type of cognition have evolved throughout the history. And I'm going to refer in particular to the origins of calculation abilities and to the origins of writing. And we can begin with the first one, that is the origins of calculation abilities. How calculation abilities evolved since the original Homo sapiens up to today, or at least up to right. And it is accepted, it is usually considered that calculation ability represents a particular complex cognitive process. It's a complex type of cognition that, as a matter of fact, represents a multifactor skill. It means different factors are contributing to calculation abilities, including verbal, we represent quantities with language, spatial, quantities have a spatial value. 1, 0 is not the same as 0, 1, totally different, that is totally different. Somatic, the fingers, the orientation, right and left, etc. Memory and executive functionalities. So it's supposed, has been proposed, that calculation abilities is a very complicated, very complex type of cognition that is simultaneously involving different types of knowledge, somatic knowledge, verbal knowledge, spatial knowledge, etc. And disturbance in the ability to calculate are frequently found in cases of tumors, stroke, etc., and are known as ecalculia. So ecalculia is the disturbance in the ability to perform calculation abilities due to a pathological condition of the brain. And calculation abilities follow a long process from the initial quantification system, from the beginning of the calculation system, up to the modern type of calculation abilities. Algebra, geometry, physics, that represent very sophisticated, very advanced form of calculation. But, as a matter of fact, some rudimentary numerical concepts are observed in animals, and I'm going to refer to the concepts that are observed in animals, and there is no question that the prehistorical man used some quantification. So quantification existed since the prehistorical man. And in the human brain, Kansaku and colleagues identify a network areas involved in enumerating involved number of auditory, visual, and somatosensory stimuli. So certain areas that were participating in enumerating different types of stimulation. And they include the premotor cortex, bilateral, supplementary motor area, posterior temporal cortex, and thalamus, pointing out that calculation abilities is relying in a complex brain system. So many brain areas may be involved in calculation abilities, right? And just to emphasize, there is a particular area in the brain that is activated when you are performing calculation abilities. And such a particular area that has been pinpointed very clearly is situated in the parietal lobe in the left hemisphere and corresponds specifically to what is called the intraparietal sulcus. This is the intraparietal sulcus. That is a particular area that is activated when you are performing any type of calculation ability. It's the core of the numerical knowledge, in other words. And this area, as a matter of fact, is an area that is situated in the parietal lobe, posterior parietal lobe, and is also related with the recognition of the fingers, and is also related with the recognition of right and left. When you have a damage in this area, this posterior parietal area in the left hemisphere, you are going to have disturbances in the recognition of the fingers, or is finger agnosia. And you are going to have disturbances in recognizing right and left mediated through the language. Right-left disorientation, what is called right-left disorientation. And this is somehow supporting that calculation abilities are based in some finger recognition abilities, right? Somatic recognition and certain spatial recognition related with our own body. So it has been observed that it's a critical area that is observed, right? And as a matter of fact, when we talk about calculation abilities, we have to distinguish different levels of numerical knowledge. There are different levels of numerical knowledge. The first one, the most basic numerical knowledge, the easiest if you want, the more primitive if you want, numerical knowledge is the ability to recognize what is called global quantification. What is more and what is less. And such an ability is observed at the animal level. So you have a dog, and you put 5 pieces of food in one dish, and in the other you put only 2 pieces of food. The dog is going to prefer the dish having 5 pieces because it's more. So this is the global quantification. It's more or it's less. It's more or it's less. Simply speaking, what is more and what is less. That is the global quantification. Recognition of small quantities is an ability that very likely exists as well at the animal level. That is called subitization. Such a phenomenon is called subitization. I know without counting that there are 3 people. Right? In that type, there are 3 people. I don't have to count. But if I want to know how many people are there in this section of the room, I have to count, because I cannot recognize right away. Suddenly. Subitization means suddenly, right? Suddenly. Subitly, right? So when we are recognizing small quantities, 1, 2, 3, we don't have to count. They are recognized as a perceptual issue, right? It's a perceptual issue. I know there are 3 people. I don't have to count that there are 3 people. Just looking at these people, I right away, suddenly, subitization. So subitization, I can see 3 people, right? So that is another type of numerical knowledge that is considered to be very primitive, if you want, this kind of perceptual issue, right? Enumeration simply means sequencing the elements. This and this and this and this and this and this. That's all, right? And correspondence construction simply means comparing collections. There is one person, another person, another person, another person, another person. That's comparing collection. I'm comparing an external collection, in this particular case, with my fingers. Related with my finger. I'm comparing 2 collections, right? Well, counting a unique name is paid to its object. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I think about each day, whatever, right? Anyhow, to each one of the elements giving 1 word. There is 1 word for each one of the elements, right? There is a different word for each one of the elements. That is counting. And each collection is paid only one number. It means only that one is 1 and 2 and 3. Cannot be in a different way. Unstable ordering principle means that all the time, I am going to say the word in the same order. 1, 2, 3. No 1, 3, 2. But has to be in a specific order. So I'm going to say, I'm going to express, I'm going to have certain utterances that are going to be produced in a particular order, in a particular sequence. A stable word ordering principle is a assignment to a permanent ordinal position. Cardinal principle, the final number name is used in a counting sequence to refer to the cardinal value of the sequence. 1, 2, 3. How many? 3. The last word that I used corresponds to the quantity. The quantity is the last of the word that I was using. And arithmetic simply means permutability, the ability to make permutation with the numbers. That is the arithmetic. Well, and arithmetical operation can be used with an external support. The most important external support, the sequence of the fingers, and the sequence of the fingers is going to be found in the child acquisition of numerical concept. So the child is going to be using the fingers, and throughout the evolution, we are going to find exactly the same tendency. The mathematical concepts are going to be closely related with the sequence of the fingers, with sequencing the fingers. And we can use other strategies for quantification, writing, the abacus, and nowadays we have these electronic devices that can be used for mathematical and arithmetical purposes. Well, most likely, these numerical abilities or some numerical abilities existed in the prehistoric man. Homo sapiens antecessors may have been capable of using corresponding construction, we mentioned what is that, in some social activities, such as food sharing. And Paleolithic man was probably able to match the number of objects in different groups and eventually the number of objects in a collection with the number of items in some external cues. For instance, the elements relate with the fingers or relate, for instance, with pebbles, something like that. Well, and the numerical system, the writing of the numerical system is going to have a very specific evolution everywhere worldwide. Everywhere evolved exactly in the same way. This is the representation of the numbers in the Roman system, that as a matter of fact is not the Roman system is taken from the Etruscan, right? And we are going to use the word digit, and digit means number, and digit means finger. The same word means number and digit, pointing out, emphasizing the close relationship between the fingers and the numbers. The fingers and the numbers are the same, ultimately are the same, the fingers and the numbers. And in the Roman numerical system, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 10, right? That's the origin. Simply 10. I'm showing the both hands. Because of that, the X simply is represented the 200 are process, right? We have the 10. And the very same strong relationship between the numerical knowledge, finger gnosis, and lateral knowledge is evident, right and left, I mentioned before. And it is not surprising to find that a decimal or vigesimal system is going to be developed in different countries throughout the history. So if we have a decimal system, the only reason for having a decimal system is that we have 10 fingers. That's the only reason. We are using a decimal system because we have 10 fingers, right? Sometimes the base is going to be 5, and sometimes the base is going to be 20. 20 probably is including the fingers and the toes, because that's the way it could be used to count, right? Well, and simultaneously, or very close in time, decimal systems, the systems are all the time decimal systems, appear in different countries, in Sumer, Egypt, India, and Crete, and different symbols were used to represent 1, 10, 100, 1000, right? Quantities related, multiples of 10, right? Thus, reviewing the history of numerical concept, it is found that what language developed a base of 10 fingers, because we have 10 fingers, sometimes 20, sometimes some systems are using a base of 20, or even 5, because we have 5 fingers in the hand, to group quantities. In some contemporary languages, a residual 20 base can be found. For instance, in French, there is a kind of residual base of 20, and in French you can say for say 80, you can say 4 20s. And 92 is 4 20s and 20. Can be said in such a way. right? Well, oh, what's happening? Use different words to come between 1 and 10. In many Indo-European languages, at least between 10 and 20, the system becomes irregular, kind of irregular. 11, 12, 13, 14, 11, 12, 13 in Spanish becomes kind of regular, and after 20, usually becomes again regular. 20 and 1, 20 and 2, 20 and 3, 20 and 4, 20 and 5, etc., etc. And the system again becomes a regular system. So that's the way that we have, right? And this is the way to represent the numbers in different systems, in Egypt, Babylonian, the Roman representation, the Chinese representation, the Indian representation, the Mayan representation, right? The Arabic representation, and the Thai representation. And we are going to see that they are representing strokes, 1 stroke, 2 stroke, 3 stroke, 4 stroke, and usually in 10, a change is going to be observed. A new representation is going to be introduced. And we have certain systems based in 20, and the Maya numerical system sometimes is presented as an example of a system that is based in 20, right? So there is a base of 20, right? And very interesting, writing numbers appearing before writing the language. So the writing of representing quantities is older than the ability to represent a spoken language, right? And we are going to find that writing the numbers is appearing in Assyria, in Egypt, etc., long time ago. And calculus, as mentioned before, means pebble, and finger, right? Mark, knots, right, etc., can be used, right? And there are certain systems, right, that are going to be representing quantities in a quite complicated way. For instance, this is the representation of quantities that were used by the Inca Indians in South America. That is called the quipu, the quipu. And the numbers were represented with knots in a string, right? And they were able to represent relatively complicated quantities. They had the ability to represent with knots relatively complicated quantities. And the Inca did not have a writing system, by the way. They didn't represent the language, but they had a strategy, a very interesting strategy for representing quantities in knots in a string. So this is an example of this quipu in the Incas. And this is the origin of the Arabic numbers that we are using. Initially were 1 stroke, 2 and 3, and later become transformed, up to the point of the way now we are writing 1, 2, and 3. How we are today writing 1, 2, and 3. That is the evolution. That is the evolution that they are going to find. Well, arithmetics, the ability to combine the permutational abilities, the ability to make permutation with the quantities, appeared in Egypt. So the ability to multiply, to divide, to add, etc., is observed only relatively recently in history in Egypt. And they were using a very original system for multiplication. Suppose that I want to multiply 18 by 12, 18 by 12. And they are going to be using what is called the system of doubling, the double. So we have 18, that is double, 36, 72, 144. The double. And we have 1, 2, 4, 8. I'm doubling and doubling. So the result of the multiplication is going to be this column, right? 4 and 8 is 12. So 72 plus 144 is 216. So the multiplication of 12 times 18 is 216. That's the way. The double of the quantity. That's the procedure that was used for the multiplication. And they also developed the inverse procedure for dividing. So in Egypt, they had the ability, they first developed the ability for multiplying and divided quantities, but using a procedure that is totally different to the procedure that we are using today. The numerical system, along with the measurement of the units, was developed departing from the body dimension, the figure, the right and left, and this tendency to use the human body as the pattern, right, is also observed in some contemporary units. So, as well, for the units, we are going to be using the body. And such a tendency to use the body for measuring is today observed in a residual way, for instance, in the English system when they refer to foot and feet. They are referring to foot and feet, simply speaking, right? That's part of the body. So they are using the body, this is a meter or something like that, for measuring, right? Right, so let's move to the second point that I wanted to mention, that is the origin of writing, how writing appeared in human history, right? How this type of cognition, so important, right, that somehow supporting executive function is related directly with executive function, is related with complex form of cognition, right? Well, writing represents a relatively recent acquisition in human history. Its development was particularly low, advancing through different steps of complexity. And even so, writing began several millennia ago, some 5,000, 6,000 millennia ago, right? Nowadays, significant changes in writing strategies are observed, associated particularly with the progressively more extended use of computers' word processors. So the ability to write nowadays is something different than the ability to write that we had when handwriting. So handwriting and writing in a computer is somehow using different basic abilities, right? Basic spatial abilities, etc. Well, and we have to trace the writing, the first manifestation moving toward writing was word painting. So the historical man began to represent the external world in walls, in the caves that they had, right? And this caves has been found particularly in France and Spain, right? Lascaux and Altamira. Lascaux cave and Altamira cave in Spain, right? And they correspond to 35,000 years ago. Mainly animal, but also people, instrument, and environmental conditions are represented in this initial painting. And this is the very initial step for developing and writing system, right? Further evolution in pre-writing represented by painting becoming standardized for representing a specific element. For instance, a standard verb is going to be used to represent a verb. It kind of, when it's, this particular representation is going to be a verb. And this is an example of these word paintings that were found particularly in France and in Spain, and they correspond to 30,000 years ago, 35,000 years ago, 25,000 years ago, etc. And they're representing people, they're representing external activities, animals, etc. And initially, hence, we have the representation of specific elements. When I have this figure, this kind of figure, this means bird, for instance, this means birds. And this bird, that is a pictogram, is considered pictogram, is a close to realistic representation. You can recognize the bird. You can recognize it is a bird. It's going to become progressively more abstract if you want. Up to the point that at the end, you in the uniform writing, it's going to be impossible to know that was a bird. But between this point and this point, there are some 2,000 years of evolution. There is a very long evolution. To change from this point to this point is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take many years for making those changes. And as a matter of fact, nowadays we distinguish two major groups of writing systems. There are two writing systems, right? On one hand, we have the logographic writing system. The logographic writing system are representing the meaning. Simply speaking, they are representing the meaning. They are not representing the phonology. They are not representing the phonology. they are representing the meaning. Today, the major example of a logographic writing system is the Chinese, right? That is representing ideas, is representing the meaning, is not representing the phonology. It is not sound-based. It's not based in the sound, right? Well, and we can distinguish several types of this logographic writing system, right? Logogram symbols that represent parts of the word, of the whole word. Some logograms resemble the things they represent, and they are sometimes known as pictogram or pictograph. Ideograms, they represent abstract ideas, so there are variations. There are variations, but all the time, what is represented is the meaning, not the phonology. The phonology is not represented. What is represented is simply the meaning. Right. Semantic phonetic, there are certain marks that are indicating also how suggestive a particular phonology. And sometimes symbols are used for the phonetic value alone. And around, and this is an example from Chinese, right? How to write the string, how to write heaven, how to write girl, etc., etc. Right. And around 1000 years BC, the Phoenicians introduced a major change in writing. It is a major step in the evolution of writing. Maybe the most important step in writing evolution, the most important step, right? And they simply made an inventory of the sounds that can be at the beginning of the words. Right? A word can begin with a left, like in a left. A word can begin with b, b, be, like beta. A word can begin good, like gibbel, right? And they use it. A left means ox. Beth means house. Gibbel means camel. Men means water, for instance, things like that. So they make the repertoire. How can begin? How can be the original sound, the beginning sound of a word? So they took all the sounds that can be observed at the beginning of the word, and the corresponding logographic representation was converted in the symbol for representing such a sound. So the ox is not going anymore to represent the ox, is going to represent only the initial sound. Ox is aleph, right? And it's going to be used, now again it's going to be used to represent not the whole word, but just the initial sound of the word. Bed, that was meaning, the meaning is house or tent, because the houses were tent, by the way, right? It's not going to be used to represent tents, it's going to be used to represent be. Given, this representation is not going to be used for the given, it's going to be used for good, just for the good. So that's the origin of the alphabetical system. The sounds are going to be represented. As you know, this system was taken by the Greeks. This system was developed around 1000 years BC and was taken by the Greeks. The Greeks introduced some changes, some important changes, and for the Greeks, the two major alphabetical systems existing in Europe were the Alphabet. That is the Latin system that was taken by the Romans, the adaptation that the Romans made to this system developed by the Greeks, Phoenicia, Greece, Romans, right? And the other evolution is the Cyrillic alphabet. The Cyrillic alphabet is also taken from the original Greek writing system. It's an evolution, it's some changes are introduced, etc. So that's the history of the writing. And in sonographic alphabets, we are representing sounds, not representing meaning, we are representing sounds. The writing system, syllabic alphabet, or phonemic alphabet can be represented. Alphabetic writing system can come in two varieties. So also there are variations. Sometimes we are representing consonants, even though can be a suggestion how is the vocal sound. There are some abjads, for instance, Arabic, Hebrew, right? They are writing the consonant, they are writing the vowel. The vowels are not written. And we have alphabets that are representing consonant and vowel. And in addition, we have, sometimes we are not representing specifically the phonemes, but we are representing syllables. And the most common example of this syllabarius or moras is the Japanese. The Japanese kana. Japanese is written in two different systems. That is kana, that is a syllabic system, and kanji, that is an ideographic system taken from the Chinese. And the kana has two variations. There are two types of kana, by the way. Well, and sometimes there is alpha syllabarius or abugidas. That is a particular type of syllabary. The sequence of consonant vowels are written with a single symbol, right? And there is a particular type of a special type of writing system that is observed, for instance, in Korean language, that the indication to the articulation. The written representations indicating the type of articulation that is used for producing that particular sound. So the fissural alphabet, the group element that indicate the component of an articulation, for instance, bilateral consonant, fricative, something like that. And the best example is the Korean writing system. Well, in Europe, 5 different writing systems are found, right? Even though these two writing systems, the writing system that is observed in Armenian language, in Georgian language, they are limited to very small geographical area. We use it just in one country, and besides they are very small countries. They are very small countries, right? But anyhow, in Europe we have 5 different writing systems, right? We have the Latin, the Cyrillic, the Greek, the Armenian, and the Georgian, right? And there are over 30 different writing systems worldwide. So nowadays, worldwide, there is a diversity of writing systems that are, the language is represented in different ways because there are different types of writing systems. And according to the frequency, the 10 that are most frequently used are, first, the Latin alphabet is the most frequently used. That is an alphabet. Consonant and vowels are represented. Consonant and vowels are represented. The Chinese, that is logographic, Arabic, Devanagari, and Cyrillic. Cyrillic, that is used in Russian. That is an alphabet. But then the Russian writing system has a characteristic that is not frequently mentioned. That is kind of unique characteristic that is not mentioned, right? And it is that in the writing system used in Russia, the diphthongs are written with a different letter. So the letters are representing phonemes, and the letters are also representing diphthongs. Ye, yo, you, ya, etc. Right? So they are writing with a specific symbol. That is a characteristic of the Russian writing system that I never have found anything about. I never have found any mention to such a characteristic, but it's a very interesting characteristic. The letters sometimes represent phonemes, and sometimes they represent diphthongs. Ya, you, yo, ya, etc. Right? The you, the ya, the ye, the yo. Okay. Well, writing system also differ in directionality, as we know. Initially, in every writing system, the directionality was not standardized, and it was possible to write from left to right, from right to left, so to write in this way. Right? And that's the way Greek people were initially writing, from left to right, and from right to left. Right. In a certain historical moment, it was usual to start writing horizontally in a particular direction and became a standard procedure for writing, but was developed later on. And by the same token, the use of initially writing or writing was in which of constructive ability, representing externally visual elements, right? The constructive ability, right? Drawing the bird, drawing the horse, drawing the head, whatever, right? And only later it became a standardized, standard movement. a standard representation. Hence, it is a practicability, became a practicability, right? And in this point, we are creating pictograms. We are creating a stage of the pictograms, right? Still later, after writing became an ideomotor practicability, it became a linguistic ability. Was related with the sounds of the language, was related directly with the spoken language. The direct relationship between the representation, the visual representation, and the phonology, the sounds that were produced. Thus, it can be proposed that writing is based in three different abilities. There are three different abilities that are participating in writing. There are visual constructive abilities, practical abilities, and linguistic abilities. And as a matter of fact, when we observe the disturbances in the ability to write due to brain pathologies, like scoliographia, we are going to find that, as a matter of fact, there are three major types of agraphic disturbances. There are three major types of agraphia that are somehow corresponding to these three basic abilities that are required for writing. Well, nonetheless, writing was an ability that was developed long time ago, over 5,000 years ago, long time ago, but the diffusion, the spreading of this ability was extraordinarily slow. Very, very, very slow. Up to the point that during the 1950s, and during the 1950s is the last week, very close in time, right? Around half of the world population was illiterate. So it's a type of ability that was extending tremendously slow. Even though, as I mentioned before, is an ability that is directly related with executive function, with complex psychological process, abstracting, problem solving, etc., controlling behavior, etc. And until the 15th century, when the printing press was invented, writing may well have been limited to very few, very limited intellectual people and monks, because monks were in charge of copying the books. So nobody else could write. Maybe only 1% of the population was able to write. And 99% of the people were illiterate. Simply speaking, they were illiterate, right? And just to see how illiteracy was extended very recently, at the beginning of the 20th century, 80% of the world population was illiterate, and only 20% of the world population was able to read and to write. But at the end of the 20th century, the relationship was inverted. 20% of the people were illiterate, and 80% of the people were able to read and to write, were literate. Grammatically, right? Well, so the diffusion of writing was particularly accelerated during the 20th century. Before the 20th century, reading and writing were kind of very unusual abilities. Very unusual abilities. And even nowadays, there are certain countries, for instance, in Pakistan, 40% of the people are illiterate. 40% of the people is simply unbelievable in a country that, on the other hand, has a very sophisticated technology. Pakistan has a very sophisticated technology, on the other hand, has atomic bombs and complex infrastructure, right? So, and has people with a very high level of education, by the way. And nonetheless, 40% of the people today are illiterate. It's unbelievable, right? Well, so the diffusion of reading and writing was particularly accelerated during the 20th century, and today it is calculated that maybe some 12–13% of the world population continues to be illiterate. And as a matter of fact, the level of education of humans, the average level of education, is 3–4 years of education. So if we take the the average level of education of the human species has a limited level of education. We're thinking about doctorate degrees and master degrees, but just a few people of the population. The average level of education continues to be limited. Well, obviously, writing represents an unusual ability in humans. An unusual ability. Just a limited percentage of the people that have lived on the earth have been able to read and to write. So it's a very unusual ability. The overwhelming majority of the humans have been illiterate, right? And reading and writing is obviously far from being a primary ability or a biological basic cognitive ability. It's simply an ability that is departing from some preadaptation. What we mention it as preadaptation. The idea that we mention as preadaptation, certain basic abilities, right, that were going to be making possible reading and writing. Right? Writing represents an ability that depends on the human cultural evolution. Writing is also an extension of oral language and one of the major mediators of human cognition. I mentioned it before that since long time ago, and we can refer to the expedition carried out by Luria and Vygotsky during the 1930s, right, it was observed that illiterate people had significant difficulties in using conceptual idea, abstracting, solving abstract problems, etc. Had difficulties in what we today refer as executive functions. And such observation presented during the 1930s by Luria and Vygotsky had been supported, had been corroborated many times in the studies about illiteracy that have been carried out worldwide, in India, in Colombia, in Mexico, in Portugal, etc. In all the studies have been corroborated exactly the same idea. Reading and writing represent a major instrument of cognition or a major type of complex cognition that is somehow supporting many types of complex cognition, supporting executive function. It's a kind of prerequisite for executive function. Like people who are illiterate has limited executive function. Right? Well, and just to take example of reading, not the writing, but example reading, that we were mentioning that there are certain basic abilities that were supporting complex cognition. We can assume that there are certain basic abilities existing in prehistorical man that were the preadaptation that are the basis for developing complex cognition. We can refer to reading. Let's take reading. And when we are reading, there is a brain system that is activated. So when we are reading, when we read, there are certain areas in the brain that are going to be activated. We can refer to the reading brain system. That is the reading brain system. It means the system in the brain that is activated when we are reading. And when we are reading words, in this particular example, we are reading words aloud, right? The pattern of activation that is observed has certain characteristics. First, the activation is observed basically in the left hemisphere. So it's an ability that is lateralized to the left hemisphere. And we are going to find that the activation is observed particularly in three brain areas. The three brain areas that are activated are the occipital lobes, particularly the left occipital lobe, but bilateral. But especially the left, but it's bilateral, right? This parietal temporal area that is supposedly participating in the cross-modal associations is involved in associating the visual information with the auditory information, with the language. Table. So the sequence of letters, the sequence of symbols, table, T-A, etc., with the sound table. So this particular area in the brain, is involved in such a cross-modal association. And we have as well the participation of a frontal area that is participating in producing in language itself. So we have that the pattern of activation when we are reading words is going to have a specific representation, a specific organization. Nonetheless, if we introduce changes in reading, the pattern of activation is going to change a little bit, even though we are going to find that three areas are all the time activated. If introducing changes, the pattern can be different. For instance, if instead of reading neutral words, I am reading emotional words. Instead of neutral words, I read emotional words. The pattern of activation is going to be more extended, and it's going to be including the right hemisphere. Right? So the right hemisphere is going to be activated if I am going to be introducing an additional variable such as emotional words, such as emotion. So this is what could be regarded as the brain functional system of reading. That is the brain functional system of reading for words. But I insist, if we change the characteristic of reading, the pattern of activation is going to change as well. We're going to find a relatively different pattern of activation. This is a paper that was published some time ago, pointing out the idea that I have been presenting, that we don't we can't have an area in the brain specialized in reading. This doesn't make any sense to suppose that we have an area in the brain specialized in reading. Reading is an ability that is unusual, has existed in a limited percentage of the world population. And it's based, we have to suppose, is based on some primary abilities, preadaptations, abilities that can be used to support reading or to support writing or to support whatever. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions,
I'm sure.
Comments,
we have a diversity of cultures represented here, so I think there definitely are questions.
So do we have different rules for reading for those who are using alphabets and for those who use other types of systems?
The brain representation is different. You have a sound-based reading, certain areas are going to be activated. If you have a graphic reading, the areas that are activated are not totally coincidental. And we have the very nice example of Japanese, because in Japan people can read both systems, and they're all the time using both systems. So if you take a newspaper, if you take certain information in Japanese, you are going to find that all the time they are using the kanji and the kana, the kanji and the kana, the kana and the kana. And from the conceptual point of view, they are quite different. One is an ideographic writing system, and the other is a sound-based, syllabic, it's a syllabic writing system, and in cases of brain pathology, they can be dissociated. In other words, a person presenting a brain pathology may have significant difficulties in reading kanji and not so significant in reading kana, or the opposite pattern can be observed, suggesting that the brain organization of the two writing systems is not totally coincidental. But that is a very interesting point, very, very interesting point, right? So the different writing systems, they have a brain organization that is not totally coincidental, depending upon the specific characteristic. We have certain writing systems that we have to analyze further that are quite regular. Russian is a regular writing system, and I understand that Russian was made regular after the 1970 revolution, that before was kind of an irregular system. The Russian during the 19th century was more complicated, and Russian became simpler after a certain point in history. And now Russian is a regular writing system. Spanish is a regular reading system. Writing can be a little bit tricky. It's not totally transparent. Reading is 100% transparent in Spanish, but writing is 80% transparent in Spanish. But we have certain systems that are tremendously irregular for reading and for writing. For instance, English and French, they are presented as the most irregular, very irregular, tremendously irregular writing system. in English you find that a sequence of letters that can be read in different ways. Read, they're written the same. Win, wine, the same. So you see W-I-N-D, you can read win or wine, and the meaning is totally different, And in French you have the situation with right. If you write E-A-U-X, you read O, and if you write E-A-U, you read O, and if you write E-U, you read O, and if you write O, you read O. So all this time you are reading O. And that is another example for irregular writing system. So the regularity of the system is quite variable. I understand that in Russian, I may be wrong, in a certain historical moment, there was the proposal to change the writing system to the Latin. Am I correct?
It was only once that it wasn't successful, but we have such kind of examples for the Azerbaijani writing system. They changed the alphabet, and they tried to change, they made an attempt to change in Moldavian. It was in 80s probably, 80s, 90s, previous century.
Because to change the writing system is something tremendously complicated. We have historical examples of a writing system that has changed. For instance, in Turkey, right? The writing system was the Arabic initially, and later was changed to the Latin writing system. But I understand that it's tremendously complicated from the practical point of view to change the writing system so dramatically, to change from the Arabic writing system to the Latin writing system, right? And now Turkish, I understand, is a very regular writing system, tremendously regular writing system, right? So the regularity is going to be depending upon the particular writing system, right? And the regularity is associated with a very important factor, and is how easy is learning to read and to write. For instance, in Spanish, it's supposed that you can read, you can learn to read, a child can learn to read in 1 year. And say able to read anything in 1 year. Because reading is very regular in Spanish. You can read any word. You know certain basic principles, and you can read anything in Spanish. Any word that you want can be read in Spanish. And in English, I understand, learning to read to a basic level is going to take 3 to 4 years. Am I right? That's what I can let you know. And that is related to something additional, an additional observation. Dyslexia, difficulties, developmental difficulties in learning to read are very common in English and represent a major issue in English. Dyslexia, developmental dyslexia, in Spanish is notoriously unfrequent. It's not so frequent. You find that it's not so frequent because the system is very regular and it's very easy to read Spanish. Is very easy. A child can learn easily, freely in 1 year. No more. You don't need more than 1 year. And an adult as well, an illiterate person in 1 year is able to learn to read. English, no. English is very complicated and very irregular writing system. And usually English and French both are taken as examples of irregular writing systems. So the regularity is going to be different, and this regularity is associated with other factors such as the developmental disorders in reading to write. With regard to dyslexia, recently, not some 10, 12 years ago, was published a paper written by some researchers in Italy, France, and England, pointing out that in dyslexia, regardless that existed some biological basis for dyslexia, dyslexia was depending upon the writing system. So dyslexia in Italian was very infrequent, as in Spanish, and I suppose in Russian, right? Because Russian is also a regular writing system. But dyslexia in English and in French, it's a headache, it's a major problem. And you're going to find in English hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of papers and publications, etc., devoted to the question of dyslexia, because it's a major issue. For us, it's not so major issue. It's, anyhow, it's a disorder, it's observed, anyhow, but not so severe. So, that's it.
Mr. Ardila, you were very persuasive telling about how the ideas about human body were implied in developing the counting system, and decimal system is definitely based on it. But you didn't mention a word about counting in dozens. And dozens. Dozen, 2 dozens, 3 dozens. In Russian, in those days, they used to count in dozens, дюжины. And it is not so obvious that this counting system is not embedded in some languages. For example, in all Germanic languages, the basic numbers are not only the first 10 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but also 11 and 12. And regularity begins from 13. The difference is in the Roman languages, where you have 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, so you have regularity after 10. But the idea of dozen is also deeply embedded, and we count hours also in dozens. How your theory can answer that dozen system counting?
Right. There is a major example of this 12 system. There is the most dramatic example that you can find in this 12 system, and it's the measure of time.
Yes.
Because time is measured in 12s. 12 hours a day, 12 hours a night.
But how is it connected to human body?
Right. No. The point is, where are the 2 additional units? Right? Why we are using 2 additional units? We have 10, and which are the 2 additional units? I have thought about that point, by the way, many times. Right? Why some system? And I was thinking all the time in the time system, how to represent the time that was developed by the Babylonians. The Babylonians, we have 24 hours in the day, we have the hour divided in 60 minutes, and the minute divided in 60 seconds because of the Babylonians. And this 60 is 5 12 times. 5 12 times. So we have 12. That's absolutely right. You are absolutely correct. The question is where these 2 additional numbers come from. By the way, the system for measuring the time is kind of nonsense system. And as far as I know, through the history, recent history, has been a single attempt, only one attempt, to change the system of time, how to count extended time. And I think that the only attempt, as far as I know, that has been done to change such a system has been during the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, they introduced changes in how to measure the time and things like that. The question is, we have 12, we have 10 units, and where are the 2 additions? I think that sometimes the 2 additions can be different. That's my understanding. And I have thought in such a problem. And I have thought in such a problem related with time. Related with time, because time is something absolutely absurd, you know. 60 minutes in 1 hour doesn't make any sense, right? Doesn't make any sense, right? 24 hours in 1 day doesn't make any sense, right? Why 24, right?
You know, I have a hypothesis, and it is really that space is sensory-based. So all our senses are located in our body. That is why the decimal system is very clearly based in senses. But time is not sensory-based. It's quite a different unity. And Babylons were good astronomists. And they observed the constellations. And what they saw were 12 constellations. And they moved in the circle. So that circular thinking, not focused on a human being, but focused on the universe, that created that system of dividing the circle of time in 12 constellations, actually. All astrology comes from it. So this is one
Can be
word,
completely true. That observation can be completely true. I don't know. I had thought that to distinguish you, because people, when counting, you go to a Amazon group, Indians in the Amazonian jungle, right? In the Amazonian jungle, for instance, they frequently count using the fingers, right? And the numbers and the fingers have the same name. For instance, this is Eta, for instance, and Eta means one and means the finger, both, right? So they use the fingers, and sometimes they move to count with the feet, right? And sometimes when they have to count larger quantities, they go to include other people. So my 10 fingers, my 10 toes, and 10 fingers of my father. Something like that, right? So I had thought that eventually to distinguish units in the feet is not so evident as distinguished units in the hand. And maybe the feet were in a certain moment interpreted as unit. And hence we have 12. That was my humble answer.
Oh. Actually, it's interesting because old Germans were not good astronomers, and their division of counting in the first 12 primitive numbers and others regular numbers cannot be derived from observing the universe, but somehow they have 11, 12. 12 or 12 in all Germanic languages, dozen comes first, and then the regularity begins.
And we use in all the languages, we use the dozen. Dozen is a way to count. All the time we're talking about dozen. So dozen is a type of unit that is strong in many languages,
yes.
In Spanish, in English, whatever. Okay. So I have asked such a question many times. Why 12? But I had asked it with regard to time. And my answer, my impression is that Indians, for instance, they count with the fingers, right? With the fingers, and when the 10 fingers are over, finished, maybe they go to the feet, and there are 2 feet. Yes. So we have 12.
But there is another very interesting thing. Let me come here and show you one thing. Maybe you are familiar with the old Scandinavian system of counting. And they were very specific about counting in 20s. For example, we have simple names for 10, for 20, for 30, and then comes, for example, in modern Danish, have reflexes of that old counting. For example, 40 is fierce. That literally means the fourth. Genitive of number 4. 50 is half of the third. Uh, 70, half of the fourth. 50, 90, half of the fifth. Før 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, half of the fifths. How can it be connected to the counting system? The only explanation is that all the fingers and toes of 4 people, and then half of the fingers of the 5th Viking. That gives you
That's good explanation. Very good observation. Very good.
But it exists. And Danish now is the only Scandinavian language who has that counting system, regardless that in old days that was the common counting system of Scandinavians.
That's right.
I just have a comment on that. Actually, the language I documented in Northwest Greenland also uses the Danish system, but only after 12, once again. So it uses Polar Eskimo words from 1 to 12, and then beyond that it switches to the Danish system. And I don't think the time hypothesis works so well there, because from April to August you have 24-hour daylight, and from 18th of October to from the 24th of October to the 18th of February you have darkness. So I think actually the constellation hypothesis is more plausible for people living, very high up in the Arctic.
For old Romans, hour was not a fixed unity. The hour was 1/12 of the light day. So the hours differed in summer and in winter. It was not only for those who lived in the north. So constellations are something more stable. But again, old Germans were not good astronomers.
Very good. Okay, yes.
I know it wasn't the focus of your presentation, but I was wondering if I could ask you about the cognitive development of spatial orientation systems. It's something I'm interested in the context of linguistic relativity. So thinking about how the language that people use determines the way they think. And one area of very promising research is spatial orientation systems. Stephen Levinson has done a lot of work on this. And he's basically said that 1/3 of the world's languages use what he calls an absolute orientation system, spatial orientation system. And the other 2/3 use what almost certainly everybody in this room uses, which is a relative spatial orientation system. Now, most of these languages that use absolute spatial orientation systems tend to be indigenous languages, such as the indigenous languages of Australia. So, an indigenous person in Australia would probably say the football lies to the northeast of my foot, or he may say the hot water tap is uphill. So they have this very unusual, very contrastive sort of spatial orientation system to the way that we have. And I know nothing at all about what the history is of the cognitive development of these different spatial orientation systems, but I noticed on your content, so it's one of your chapters. I'm just wondering, historically, we know if there were many, many different spatial orientation systems, or how is it we've come about? We've got to a point where we seem to just have two, and I'm wondering how these haven't merged somehow to form just one. You see what I mean?
Yes, indeed the orientation system is quite idiosyncratic of every language, and every language and every region, by the way, in one particular language, has certain strategies for spatial orientation. If you go to Guadalajara, people will talk about up and down the city. And if you go to Bogota, Colombia, people all the time are talking about up and down, to go up and to go up, and Bogota is totally flat city. And there are certain implicit information that frequently is not overt. You don't know what is the implicit information they have for referring to. Down the city in Guadalajara means downtown, or downtown. And up it means away from downtown. In Colombia, up and down is related with the numerical system of the streets, right? And if you ask to somebody in Bogota, why you're talking about up, nobody knows. Nobody can tell you explicitly what is the reason. And the reason is very simple. It's according to the numerical system. Because all the streets have a number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And in the other direction are named carreras. So we have avenues and streets. And all the time when it's increasing, you say up. And when it's decreasing, you say down. But people are not aware of that. And as a matter of fact, how represented the space in a language is something very idiosyncratic. Just to remind that the hypothesis of words appear about the interrelation between language and culture was due to the fact that words was studying the Hopi language. And in the Hopi language, the representation of the space was so tremendously complicated that he was unable to understand it. And he initially proposed, people represent the space according to the language that they speak. That was the initial proposal of the work that has a hypothesis. And later on, he went a step further and stated what we know, people represent the reality and think about depending upon the language that they speak. So the departing point was the representation of the space. And I know that in some languages from the Indians in the Amazonian jungle, the system for representing the space is so complicated that it's absolutely unavailable for an outsider. A person who is not a native speaker simply cannot understand what is the system that they are using. That's a very Okay, thank you very much again for the attention.
Thank you very much.
I think it's an interesting topic, right?
Yeah,
And I learned a lot.
So I had something.
I'm going to study Scandinavian language.
Спасибо большое. На память вам дарит
Oh,
сертификат о выступлении. Да. И приглашение войти перед коллегой нашего зала.
As promised.
Very honored.
Еще наш вступление.
Oh, thank you very much.
Да, а это последний номер нашего журнала, который вас приглашает.
Большое спасибо за внимание.
Спасибо большое.